Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today I am going to be talking about something that I have personally labeled as the gate kid phenomenon. And the gate kid phenomenon basically consists of kids from as early as the 1970s to as late as the 2010s, and even somebody saying they graduated in 2024, basically stating that they were in a program where they were tested for psychic abilities or other ESP, PSI abilities. I do have to be very careful when talking about topics like this because they are not only conspiracy theories, but they deal with information that would be considered classified. They could also create defamation cases and stuff like that. So please just note that my language choice is on purpose and that this video is not to say that these things 100% did happen, but rather it is just a conspiracy theory that is currently floating around, and I love conspiracy theories, so I was researching it. GATE stands for Gifted and Talented Education. Kids would be pulled out of class for weekly testing, or they would have an after-school program, sometimes go to camps, where they would basically get these learning experiences and higher education than other people on their grade level did not get, or that was the basis understanding of what the class was. Kids who were in this program are claiming that they would often do things that were unrelated to school, didn't make any sense to them, would be observed through everything they were doing, always had a creepy feeling every time they were doing it, and they also suffer from memory loss. So this has created a phenomenon of people basically saying that they were being tested psychically, and also there's other weird experiences that people have tagged along. So today we're going to dig into all of them and see exactly what is going on with this program. So personally, I did have knowledge of what GATE was growing up, and I did see a couple videos of people talking about it a couple of months ago, but specifically I came across a video from Jake Knows Nothing, and he was doing an interview with another YouTuber named Daniel. I don't remember his channel name, unfortunately, I'm sorry. But they basically were just talking about it, and it kind of really struck me and made me want to research into this. So a couple of things that they discussed in their video was basically just the generalization of what a lot of kids who were in this program claimed they were doing in the class and the type of treatment that they received. So a lot of kids remember having to take white little tablets that kind of look like Smarties. This would usually be given to them in a little white paper cup or a little Dixie cup. And then they also remember a pink drink. A lot of people say this was just a fluoride drink, but there is some other possibilities that Jake did dive into of what this drink could possibly be. There's no confirmation if this drink was that, but of course we'll dive into the possibilities a little bit later. Kids also reported specifically using the Zener cards in class, which are for PSI and ESP testing. They remember having hearing tests all the time in which they would hear double beeps, hear the beep before it would beep, or could see colors of the beeps. They remember having to locate a red and green dot with their eyes closed. They remember listening to the Gateway tapes produced by the Monroe Institute and having to take naps after listening to these tapes. They remember having weird field trips to places specifically for science or to other schools. A lot of gate kids also claim to have had near unalived experiences where it's mainly consisting of drowning, but there are some other ones as well. They have seen aliens or seen stuff in the sky, had contact with aliens or something of that sort. They have memories of Egypt, Atlantis, or space civilizations. They remember there being a brown trailer that was boarded up with paper that they would go into. Some gate kids claim that they have leniency with authority and police officers in particular. So when they're in situations where they should have really gotten in trouble, they were let go. All gate kids say that they had a feeling that they were being watched or being tracked, even outside of school, just in their daily lives. A lot of gate kids also say that they were often recruited for other things within the military. And a lot of gate kids also were pushed towards mental institutionalization, where they would be marked as depressed or suicidal. There's also other weird things like the RH blood genotype, and specifically being in satanic, military, or medical families. There are a lot of other conspiracy theories that overlap with the gate kid phenomenon. So today I want to tell you guys guys a story of how this program came to be and the phenomenon that surrounds it. Before I dive into the story, I do want to apologize if you guys hear any background noise. I got a new phone, so I don't have a mic to my phone anymore. But without further ado, let's get on into the story. The first thing we're going to touch on today is the official history of the GATE program and how it came to be. The official 1040 Assembly Bill that put the actual gifted and talented education program into effect went into effect in the 1980s. But before this was put into effect, there was a long history of gifted and talented programs in other areas of the world. It goes all the way back to 427 BC, where Plato actually had a program until about 347 BC for solving the problem of the universe. So he would pool gifted kids or kids that excelled to solve the problem of the universe. And then we go to the Tang Dynasty from about 580 to 618 BC, and they also had programs for gifted children. And then we have the Renaissance, where people would be pooled when they had gifts in art, literature, or architecture. Then the idea of gifted children goes to Sir Francis Galton. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because he is the grandfather to eugenics, which of course is not something that we all may like. Sir Francis Galton basically believed eugenics was improving the genetic quality of the human population, and he believed in statistical human ranking. He basically believed on sterilization of minorities because he believed that minorities were the inferior races. Plato's work was also considered by Francis Galton. Galton was half cousin with Charles Darwin, which you should recognize from Darwinism, and Galton was the first person to apply emotional evolution to humans, meaning if your mom was depressed, you could be depressed. If your mom was aggressive, you could be aggressive, and things like that. Galton created behavioral genetics, and he wanted to measure the extent to which genetics and environmental factors affect our differences. He planned to do this through mental imagery experiences, as he wanted to measure people's mental imagery abilities, their sensory perception, and their natural intelligence. This mirrored early PSI testing. And at the end of his studies, he believed that the qualities could be improved through interventions in heredity with tracking and breeding, which is why he believed in sterilization. Then we move on to Lewis Terman. And Lewis Terman is somebody who worked for Stanford, and he actually is the godfather of IQ test. In World War I, Terman was a commissioned officer for the military, and he specifically did intelligence tests for the Army. Terman took 643 California kids for genetic studies of geniuses, and these kids were called termites during this study. Kids were checked up on in 1921, 1930, 1947, and 1959, which is after Terman was dead. So they were still conducting his experiment even after he passed away. This was considered one of the most extensive studies on high-functioning children, and it is quoted a lot till this day. It is alleged that these tests were used for remote viewing Stargate candidates, for World War II, for military intelligence filters, and for Cold War psychic screening. The test consists of isolation pattern recognition, memory, language anomalies, and other things like that. It was thought that they were trying to create telepathic soldiers for the military without these soldiers' actual knowledge or consent. Terman had a friend named Letta Hollingworth, and Letta specifically specialized in gifted who didn't fit in. Unlike Francis, who focused on gifted kids who may have came from more wealthier families, Hollingworth actually wanted to focus on children from all areas. Hollingworth said that it's not just about genes and that smart kids aren't always rich or look nice, and she emphasized that early intervention, identification, and daily contact, as well as grouping gifted children with others with similar abilities, was one of the top priorities. Hollingworth is also quoted saying that gifted children came with spiritual burdens. He said that Hollingworth tracked hypersensitivity, dream recall, and emotional clairvoyance. A lot of Terman and Hollingworth's work was academically public, but military intel agencies adopted and classified the most promising elements, especially during the Cold War. Now let's go to the Cold War. The Cold War began in 1947. A notable event that goes into this series will be the fact that the Sputnik was produced by the Soviet Union, and that was the first artificial Earth satellite. So this kicked off the race to space. It also rose national security concerns, in which is rumored that they started using remote viewing, and the people who had these natural resources for intelligence, defense, and innovation were used in the studies to produce remote viewing. With the rise of national security concerns over the years, there was the National Defense Education Act put into effect in 1958. Along with this, they wanted to fund math, science, and foreign languages because they wanted more people to go into mathematical and scientific fields so that they continue to beat other countries in these fields, as well as the military, of course. Part of this National Defense Act had them identify and track academically gifted youth so that they could offer them scholarships and special curricula. There was a lot of funding in this that had to do with psychological testing and data collection. This act allegedly laid out the blueprint for selective government recruitment programs like MK Ultra and Stargate. It said that they started creating profiles for these gifted children. Allegedly, these profiles for these kids were extremely cognitive in cryptography, espionage and counter intel, advanced military strategy, and parapsychology testing like remote viewing and precognition. Now, I'm sure we'll touch back on the war stuff in a little bit, but for now, let's get back to the history aspect of everything. In 1983, there was an 18-month-long study called A Nation at Risk that said U.S. students were no longer receiving superior education. This study urged the U.S. to increase GATE program funding, citing that curriculum enrichment and acceleration was a priority. This study also urged that identification standards and servicing standards be created for gifting students. Then in 1987, we have the Templeton Foundation getting involved. Now, John Templeton was a wealthy man who basically wanted to support progress in religious and spiritual knowledge, and he did this by mixing religion with science most of the time. Templeton scholars often advise the NAGC programs, and many neuroscientists funded by Templeton also receive DARPA grants. These scientists are noted as studying science and spirituality, human potential, free will and consciousness, emergency forms of intelligence. Their research is often studied by psych programs that train GATE teachers. A lot of these scientists are thought to believe in a post-human race that will merge AI with spirituality and consciousness. They want to control a narrative on AI rights and alien contact, as well as human enrichment. Again, that part is alleged. Then in 1988, we have the official Jacob Javadis GATE-funded school program, which actually had no district level program funding. Instead, they focused on funding three things that went into this program. The three things that they decided to focus on was research for effective methods, identification, and programming. They also wanted to focus on unrepresented populations that may not have been touched before. This led to there being a standard definition for GATE kids, and there are two different definitions. It is high-achieving kids who are creative, or kids who need extra service activities not ordinarily provided by the school. These programs consisted of pull-out programs, various grouping strategies, different instructions and curriculum than the rest of the grade level, magnet, specialized, or self-contained schools. Whatever magnet means, I'm not sure. Some of these programs were part-time, where the kids would go to regular classes and these special classes, and some of them would be full-time, where they were grouped with similar students for grade achievement. So there was definitely different tiers to the test used in the GATE program. Most tests are ages 18 and under, and next to the non-verbal section of the test, they have an N/A, which means not applicable. But other tests, like the K-Bit-Kaufman, were for ages 4 to 90, and they did have an option for non-verbal commentary. These tests were used to observe verbal and non-verbal cognitive abilities, perceive relationships, and complete visual analogies. General standards to get into this program are intellect, specific academic aptitudes, creativity, leadership, visual and performing arts, and psychomotor ability. Now, the two main programs that people like to connect to the GATE school program are Project Stargate and Project Gateway, which are two kind of parapsychology studies that were held by the US military. Now, Gateway itself was not directly by the military, but we'll get into how it connected. So, Stargate was a US military project from the 70s to the 90s. It specialized in remote viewing, psychokinesis, and precognition. This has been released, these tests has been done, it is declassified documentation. However, whether this was actually successful is disputed. The Gateway, however, is a series of tapes produced by Robert Monroe by the Monroe Institute, and it was adopted by the military for the remote viewing project. Stargate itself was funded by a lot of organizations, but I researched two that are still around to this day. One of them is Parapsychology Foundation of New York, and that was actually founded by Eileen Johnson Garrett, who was actually known as an Irish medium. In the 1930s, Eileen was giving a series of psychic tests, and she was then labeled one of the greatest mediums of the 20th century. The other funding that I saw was still around is the Mind and Science Foundation, and they have a lot of meetings with Dalai Lama. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but Dalai Lama is a Tibetan Buddhist, and Buddhists do believe in higher ascension, different planes, that kind of stuff. This Mind and Science Foundation also gives yearly awards for consciousness work. If you're somebody who works in a science or medical field and you produce a valid work for consciousness within 5 years of receiving your degree, you get this award. And when it comes to Gateway, Robert Monroe wrote 3 books and claimed to study and travel himself before funding and creating the Gateway tapes.
This is the first step along your path to a gateway beyond which is discovery, your own discovery of reality, of truth, of who and what you are. Now a simple preparation. Because of the special audio techniques used, it's important that certain sounds reach your right ear and others your left ear. To be sure of this, you should be hearing my voice in your right ear at this moment.
The Gateway tapes were then adopted by the military. They were reviewed, studied, and verified by Wayne M. McDonald, and the document was made to be a useful guide for the USAINSCOM who were required to take Gateway training, meaning that at the time that this document was produced and released, they believed, or at least Wayne M. McDonald believed, that this guide would be useful for any military personnel required to take this training. And the theory is that the Stargate and Gateway programs were implemented into school. As stated prior, GATE projects were started around the 1980s, the official foundation around 1988. Well, the Stargate docs were written in 1993 and the Gateway documents were written in 1983. So right in the same decade, from 83 to 93 is when all 3 of these programs came to exist. But these are not the only programs involved in this whole conspiracy tale that is being painted. To fully get the picture of why this conspiracy is fully into full effect, we need to go 20 years back to 1945. In 1945, something called Operation Paperclip began. Operation Paperclip lasted from 1940s into the early 1970s. It was allegedly the US government recruiting people from Nazi Germany, eventually leading into the Soviet Union, to come and work for the US. The goal of this was to prevent top scientists from other countries from falling into the wrong hands. Crazy, you guys, I just got deja vu. Anyways, it is said that these scientists specialized in weapons, aerospace, and even mind control. In the 1940s, about 1,600 German scientists were brought to the US, many who allegedly had Nazi ties. And these scientists were merged into programs with NASA, US Air Force, and some other things as well. By the 1950s, it said that Operation Paperclip moved on to blackmailing or buying Soviets to get them to switch sides. This included Soviet scientists, mathematicians, and even parapsychologists. Some projects like Project Troy, MK Ultra, Stargate, and Sunstreak directly mirrored Soviet and Nazi psychotronic experiments. This even allegedly went up into the 90s. It said that the US and NATO recruited more Russian PSI researchers to also prevent them from joining opposing sides. As mentioned before, these people are thought to have worked in other projects like MK Ultra. MK Ultra also started in the 1940s when some of these scientists were thought to be being brought over to the US. MK Ultra focused on things like mind control using drug or trauma-induced scenarios. The MK Ultra documents were declassified in 2018, so we do know that this was a real thing. But what I didn't know is that the documents were actually only declassified because of a Canadian lawsuit that has to do with another man that is linked to other things as well. Top of the MK Ultra document, it clearly states a 14-year CIA vet claimed that the project didn't stop and that the abolishment was just a cover-up story. This person also alleged that in 1973, a CIA director ordered to have most of the stuff from this experiment destroyed, so there was little left for the actual investigation that is included in this document. Some key things they worked on in MK Ultra was the perfection of these drugs, and the drugs were thought to make hypnosis easier or enhance its usefulness, make people withstand coercion, torture, or privatization, aka brainwashing, produce amnesia for events preceding or during use. It was thought that these drugs could lower work ethic and ambition in men, short-term distortion of your senses without permanent damage, and something else listed as a material administered by above roots that could make it impossible for a man to do any physical task. They were really trying to make men weak. After MK Ultra comes in Project Blue Book and Project Moondust. Blue Book allegedly started in 1952, while Moondust allegedly started in 1953. Blue Book is thought to have ended in 1973. It said Blue Book wasn't stopped, but transitioned into other programs like the AARO and the UAP. Was barely founded in 2022, so that would mean Blue Book just ended. Try to look into Blue Book. You will find that there are mentions of MJ12, and MJ12 is a whole alleged group. There are no official documents that can state MJ12 did ever existed. Majestic 12 are thought to be people who made deals with aliens, went out of our universe with these aliens, and they've been using alien tech to basically stir a world order, and they are behind a lot of things in this world. In Project Blue Book, it says that they had a total of 12,618 sightings, and only 701 of them were left unidentified by the end of the program. This could mean two things. It could mean that they figured out that these sightings were not UFOs, they were some regular plane or maybe a satellite or an asteroid or something like that. Or it could mean that they have identified these crashings as alien crashes or alien sites, so that's why they are no longer unidentified. When it comes to Moondust, there is no clarification that Moondust really ever existed. There is no confirmation or declassified document that does say Project Moondust was a full project, but I was able to come across a document that does mention Moondust as the subject, and the document was about a spacecraft that fell from the sky. In the document, it discussed that if nobody claimed this craft, that different countries were basically fighting over it, trying to get rights, trying to test it and see where this craft came from. Project Blue Book and Project Moondust allegedly is what led into them looking for starseeds or alien hybrid children. But we'll get more into that a little bit later. In 1954, there was the Eisenhower meeting and the Holloman Air Force Base incident where they began collecting reports of contactee pregnancies and genetic anomalies. Moondust also specifically mentions biological samples from sites and the radiation, electromagnetic, and psychic anomaly test, whatever that means. Classified Moondust records allegedly state cases of mothers being abducted and returning pregnant. There's also cases of psychic children being born after sightings, kids having off-the-chart EEGs. These kids may also have unusual auras or emotional non-locality. As mentioned before, the MJ12, there's no official documents saying that they exist, but there is allegedly leaked documents that do say MJ12 somewhere on them. Because of that reason, there's no confirmation on what these people did or if they even existed, but it's speculated that they likely oversaw the transition of Blue Book into hybrid tracking. tracking, as well as genetic surveillance, and the led research into children born with anomalous traits. It's speculated that these people likely oversaw the transitioning of Blue Book into hybrid tracking, which included genetic surveillance and research into children being born with anomalous traits. By the 70s, it's believed that watch lists were already created for people believed to be part of ET walk-ins. A lot of kids who experienced this gate kid phenomenon say that they felt like they were being watched, psychically testing, but there's also 100% a database to track these gifted kids, and most parents don't seem to know that there is a database for this. And we know there's a database because the database was approved and made for national security. Now, it doesn't mean that only gate kids are in this database. There could very well be kids in this database who were not part of the gate program because they just show high academic records and it's promising to the government. Of course, the government would want to know what citizens are smart and what citizens could possibly add something to the US inventions when they get older. So of course, it's not necessarily weird that they would have a tracking system for smart kids. However, there is another piece of information I stumbled across, and I have heard of it before, but I never did any research on it. This project is called Project Monarch. And going into reading about this topic of Project Monarch, let's just say that nothing regarding Project Monarch can be said to be 100% anything true. Diving into this topic was actually pretty hard for me. I had to stop and step away for a second because it got a little too deep for me, and it was just crazy. What I found was like an archived writing from a guy who was known to be a whistleblower. And it was a really in-depth writing, and it overlaps with a lot of other stuff as well. So let's just get into it, read you guys what I found regarding this project. I'm sure as I read over it, a lot of people who say they experience this phenomenon may get triggered by something said, so I just want to kind of give a warning. I did leave some stuff out. If you are interested in finding this, I just say that you go try to look up Project Monarch. What I found was on archive.org. But other than that, let's just get into it. Project Monarch was allegedly kind of like MK Ultra. It was said that in Project Monarch, they would use brain control theories, mainly in celebrity or elite programming. The encrypted writing that I found basically said that Nazis were using this mind control and the US adopted it when they were brought over. This piece of writing is from someone who claims to have not only heard from insiders, but from victims as well. So this piece of writing is slamming the US for allegedly partaking in these type of experiments. The writing even includes a quote from an ex-CIA agent who, when asked about Monarch, said it was stopped in the 60s and he was pretty irritated being asked about it. It goes on to say that these type of studies date back to ancient Egypt and the Egyptian Book of the Dead. It said that in this book there are torture techniques and spells or drugs that would cause hypnosis and corrosion and stuff like that. It said that all of this testing done is rooted in nothing but Satanism. It goes on to say that the people tested in this program were twins or of specific bloodlines, and some are ostensibly programmed to fill their destiny or chosen as generational curse breakers. There are some people who were thought to be expendable, coming from broken or crime-filled homes as well. It is quoted that victims usually respond more readily to rigid religion as it's their base programming. Authority goes unchallenged. Physical identification marks of people who may have taken part in the Monarch experiments are a mole. But it's also said that bloodliners were thought to be left with pure, unblemished skin. This is already sounding kind of crazy, but let's get super psychotic and dive into other stuff that this document said. This piece of writing, and I'm going to quote it, it goes on to say, "The purpose of this sophisticated manipulation may sound unrealistic depending on your understanding of physical and spiritual realms. The deepest, darkest altars within bloodlines are perpetrated to be dominant until the Antichrist is rebuilt." The Antichrist. These New World altars supposedly contain callback orders or instructions to trigger large sums of clones or soulless people to train and or to initiate control programs into the new millennium. Non-biological twinning is another bizarre feature within Monarch. For instance, two unrelated children would be ritually initiated in a magical soul bonding ritual, so they might be inseparably paired for eternity. The two share halves of the program information, making them interdependent on each other. Paranormal phenomena such as astral projection, telepathy, ESP, etc. appear to be more pronounced in those who have undergone this process. It goes on to talk about the different levels that there are to this programming. It also talks about programming in Disney movies, food, the different levels. Let me just say, the people allegedly connected to Project Monarch are the same people that are the reason the Canadian lawsuit against MK Ultra came to exist. So again, victims who allege that they were victims of this work of Monarch are the reason that MK Ultra was pushed to be declassified. Allegedly. I'm just gonna stop on that document. It is so much deeper and darker. I feel like right now reading it, maybe because I already know it wasn't like as bad, but if you want to go read the rest of that yourself, you can. I'm not gonna dive into everything that was in that part. It's just too much for me. I might have to wait some time before I even go and finish really thoroughly reading all of it because let's move on. The final classified project that comes into play is Project Looking Glass. Project Looking Glass has been alleged since about the 1980s, but it's basically timeline viewing to predict market trends, events, and also prevent disruptors or crime and stuff like that. We already know predictive AI is coming out now. They are talking 1000% about using predictive AI to predict people's crimes and stuff like that right now, right here in the US at this time. However, the allegedness comes from it being used way back in the day to trace children and other people who were tested during these other programs. Basically, just think as Project Looking Glass as AI surveillance, but it gets a little deeper than that. So Looking Glass was thought to be a black project, kind of like Section Z and stuff like that. It was an AI and quantum simulation predicting and policing behavior. This technology has been alleged since about the 1980s and again alleged around the early 2000s, and is basically that they have been predicting disruptive outcomes or disruptive people. It's also alleged that this was recovered from alien or Atlantean/Sumerian technology, okay? Allegedly, while they were using this looking glass back in the day, they predicted a global shift of consciousness between 2012 to 2030 and that they could not stop it. Now, what's so funny about this global shift of consciousness is that spiritual people and people who are into like quantum timelines and stuff like that have been talking about a global shift in consciousness for a while. Even people like Edgar Cayce, who was known as the Sleeping Prophet, predicted a global shift in consciousness, and some of Cayce's predictions actually came true. So it was funny to me that this was allegedly predicted by Project Looking Glass as well. Along with the fact that people have been saying there's going to be a global shift in consciousness, if you're not aware, there is the Schumann resonance chart, which basically measures the energy or output of the earth, and it has been spiking to never before seen levels this year. I never knew about this until this year when I started seeing videos of people talking about it and talking about the timeline shifts or the awakening symptoms that you may be experiencing. But just seeing that it's also included in this is very crazy to me. But anyways, after they predicted this global shift of consciousness, it said that it was predicted that they would not remain in control unless they implemented extreme control with AI, surveillance, medical tyranny, and more, which kind of sounds like what this is doing right now, but this video is not about that. So a lot of these projects have to do with a specific company that is known for cutting edge tech for national security. They're known for conducting high risk, high reward, and known to push the boundaries of science and tech. From their website, it said they foster culture in a variety of programs, challenges, and collaborations with universities, various industries, and the government. This company also works with brainwave tracking and mapping, and they released a statement saying that chemicals and biological elements work together to grant new capabilities, altered properties, or enhanced microsystem. They're basically stating that chemicals and biological agents harm microsystem, which is technology. So they basically want the chemicals and biological elements being used around technology to be able to grant new capabilities, alter properties, and enhance the microsystem of technology. There's also the PRISM program to be honorably mentioned. This is thought to be a top secret NSA program that allegedly accessed digital data from the top 9 companies in the US. It uses all online data, even voices, without warrant. There was even an issue with Verizon specifically and this other PRISM project. It's used for FISA, which is foreign surveillance, and it began in 2007. It was leaked 6 years later in 2013 by an NSA contractor named Edward S., who warned that the database include dangerous criminal activities. I also saw stuff saying that Gate Kid documents and psychological records went missing in 2013, which is around the time that a lot of this stuff was being released. I also saw that there was an investigation about how a certain part of the US was doing bad interrogations on people, and during this investigation was the same time that the Gate Kid documents are said to have gone missing. And in this document, speaking of the investigation, said that that department tried to destroy video evidence of the interrogations that they were doing. So it's just funny that while they were allegedly trying to destroy evidence of interrogations, it also happened that a bunch of documents went missing that had to do with gifted and talented kids. One other interesting thing I did find while trying to research, on the Stargate docs, there are blacked out areas, but next to these blacked out areas, there is an abbreviation SG1A. I tried to find out what this means, but I couldn't really find anything regarding it. But what I did find was a military science fiction made by MGM, and it is called Stargate. It is about Stargate. So I started doing research on what this show or franchise is about. What I find interesting about this science fiction is that it was written 1 year after the Stargate docs were written, not after they were declassified, 1 year after they were written. Okay, so it is based off of the 1994 Stargate film, 1 year after the docs were written. And what's funny about that is that people have said that that special part of the United States has worked closely with Hollywood and puts the real in movies and the fake in real life to confuse us and keep us, from not solving their plan. So for the sake of this video, let's pretend we all are insane, experience some type of psychosis. Military team SG1 uses Stargate portals to travel to different dimensions. The Stargate that they traveled through is in Colorado. Their mission is to find alien tech and allies to defend the Earth. And they find aliens such as the Goldlots, which are snake-like parasite aliens, the replicators, which are mechanical life forms that use Chiron-based nanotech, like Transformers, but they apparently shape into humans, so human Transformers. Lastly, there are the Ori. The Ori are said to be ascended beings with advanced tech and knowledge of the universe. The Ori made the humans worship them. Ori did this by presenting a false religion and making humanity think that they were their gods. The Ori also have paranormal abilities. The Gulad had human incubators and they traveled in pyramid warships. Gulad would transport human slaves to other planets and pose as ancient Egyptian gods or other mythological gods like Roman and Greek. The show also touches on Norse, Greek, Roman mythologies, and even touches on the King Arthur mythology, which is used in a lot of mythology type of series now as well. The Stargate 1 team learned that highly evolved humans known as ancients built the Stargate portals millions of years ago, and then that they ascended to a higher realm of existence after because they agreed not to harm or bother other species. And this actually sounds like a pretty good series that I'm scared to watch in case all other things could be connected. Like, I don't want to find out anymore. Thing I found related to SG-1A was something called Project Sunstreak. Now, on this document regarding Project Sunstreak, all it really talked about was, it sounded like a drug deal. It said... The mission is to describe the activity and vessels involved of drug transportation. The drug was cocaine in crystalla form. It says that there was 3 boats transporting the drugs, but that one would appear empty. This could be a harmless document because it could just be them trying to stop drugs from entering our country. A quote from the document says that they wanted to stop blank from getting the goods and getting away, or basically cheating them out is what it sounded like to me. But again, it could be harmless. They're stopping drugs from entering our country, right? That's what I would think. But I just think it's ironic that the 2 things that I find related to SG-1 are about drugs and a show about space travel and aliens and ancient stargates and stuff like that. Okay, now you guys, there was way more that I wanted to get into. I did not realize that it would be this long. I do have more pages. I have a first-hand account from a gate kid who was also a military child, and some kind of allegedly firm connections that they could make. I also have a bunch of other triggers and stories that I had thought were very interesting and very relevant to the topic. So I will be making a part 2 specifically on that. Part 2 will include the first-hand story. It will include the triggers and the other real life things that people are actually saying. I did not expect the video that I posted to get such a large response, but thank you guys for giving me such a large response. This is a topic I'm super interested in. I have always been super interested in conspiracy theories and stuff like that. So definitely subscribe. Stay tuned for part 2. I will be putting it out here soon. It will not take as long to drop as this video did. Even though this video only took a couple days to drop, I feel like that was too long. I felt like I was spiraling trying to do this research, just finding stuff that was throwing me for a loop. And I feel like I dove into psychosis, which is why I said at the beginning of this video, to believe in this stuff is to have imagination. There is no way that we can say that 1,000% people were being tested on. That's just not something you want to run around saying, okay? You don't run around saying that. But it's just interesting how these things overlap, how they kind of link together, the people and companies that could possibly link them together. And then additionally, it's kind of like the Mandela effect. This huge thousands of people remember having these weird, strange memories that other people are telling them are not true. So it is just a weird phenomenon going on. And that's why I decided to call it the gate kid phenomenon, because only 2 to 6% of kids were in this class. About 6% total were in gifted education classes, and about 2% went through the full program through their whole school years. It's a very small group of people who would even be able to talk about this topic, okay? And to just hear some of their stories is very mind-blowing, bone-shattering, very chilling things to hear and to learn. So definitely subscribe, stay tuned. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will definitely be back within the next day or 2 with part 2. All right, bye.